It is a pleasure to have been invited to present to this live conference on Instagram. My name is Rosemary White, and I'm a pediatric occupational therapist specializing in the treatment of children and their families in Seattle, Washington, as well as teaching and consulting internationally. I am actually from Australia, although I live, as I said, in Seattle, Washington, the football capital of the United States, with our team, the Sounders. I am really excited to be here and to revisit all of my colleagues from all the professions in Brazil, the US, and the world. And you can see there is a photograph of Isabel, who came to Seattle to work in my summer camps, and I've seen her again many times when I have been in Brazil, as well as my other colleagues from Rio, Itaperuna, as well as Piracicaba and Salvador, Recife, and the host of many wonderful professionals I've met throughout my travels in Brazil. So it's wonderful to be here. I want to share with you the evolution of my work as an occupational therapist over the years. As I said, I'm from Australia, and I did my undergraduate training in occupational therapy in Sydney, Australia. And during my training, I developed a passion for neurology and treatment that had a meaning to it and a theoretical background. Hence, it led me to really embracing neurodevelopmental therapy. So as a young therapist, I flew to London and did my NDT course with the good fortune of being trained by Carol and Bertha Bobath, who developed that treatment approach. So my first approach in OT was very much taking functional activities, but looking at it through the development of a motor lens. But over the years, I then started to become increasingly interested in sensory integration and the marriage between motor and sensory. And again, I had the good fortune to be moving to the United States to come and experience working here. And I worked in a hospital and then had the opportunity to be in a work-study program with Jean Ayres and later do some work for her. And this opened up my eyes to just the richness of sensory integrative theory. In my practice, there's also always been a partnership between myself and the parent who is always present in sessions. So after I worked for Jean Ayres, I opened up a private practice in Los Angeles that was a sensory integration practice providing services for children with a diagnosis of autism and other challenges in relating and communicating. At that time, I also had other therapists working with me as well. As I worked with more and more children and their families with autism, there was a shift in our work from sensory and motor focus in sensory integration to really seeing the impact of what we call sensory modulation and the related physiological and emotional regulation that the children experienced. And this could be experienced both physically but also emotionally. So treatment was beyond the primary focus of use of equipment to address the sensory systems and thinking purely about each of the individual sensory systems and the child's response. But we began to think about not only how the child related to the world, but also how I related to the child, how the parent related to the child. And we brought in much more thought about the therapeutic use of self. And this involved really being consciously aware of our pacing, our tone and volume of voice, our rhythm and timing, positioning and handling with the child, and also my touch, how I touched the child, how I supported them to really get a better sense of their body and what their intentions and ideas were. I had a good fortune at this time also to be thinking about that our voice, our pacing, our rhythm and timing supports those sensory systems, but it supports it in a very much more interconnected way. And as my approach embraced this more therapeutic use of self in concert with the environment in my sensory integrative treatment, with the parents integrating this into their interactions at home and with others who are involved with the child's care, including other family members as well as other professionals. So at this time, I would have other people sitting in on sessions, and what I saw was that the children's sensory modulation, as it improved, with better physiological and emotional regulation that was being addressed by all interacting with the child, that then it supported improvement in their ability to attend and have a better readiness for social interaction. So now the OT treatment, embracing sensory integration, the use of self, and thinking about that balance, we now started to see this huge development in terms of the social capabilities and the readiness to learn in children. The other thing that was happening at this time is we were starting to look at development and the sensory systems, not as single sensory systems where we focused on the vestibular system or the tactile system, and we put them into these boxes of under-responsivity and defensiveness. And when we're thinking about this, it really doesn't talk about how the sensory systems talk to one another and integrate and actually have communication before we're even consciously aware. And I started to think again about that use of self and our pacing, timing, rhythm and timing and volume, and how we were going to support the children, not only in terms of that use of self, but also in our emotional relationship with the child to actually bring about better interconnectivity. Rather than looking at one system, we wanted to look at how they interact with one another. And research has supported this, including the work of Lucy Miller, as well as others later on, both in research in Israel, as well as in the United States and other places. At this time, too, I was teaching on NDT, neurodevelopmental therapy, and sensory integration throughout the United States and Canada to OTs, PTs, speech and language pathologists, psychologists, educators, and parents. I feel it's important to bring parents into this learning process because they're the ones who are working and living with their child. And this led me to collaborate with a wonderful pediatric neurologist and researcher, Dr. Margaret Bauman, as we blended her presentations of her neurological and neurobiological research on autism, and I would then bring in the clinical application from research to clinical practice. It was this series of presentations that led me to be invited to meet Stanley Greenspan, a pediatric psychiatrist, and Serena Weeder, PhD, a clinical psychologist, and their interdisciplinary faculty. This was the beginning of my professional journey into DIR floor time, which really integrated all my previous learning into rich and comprehensive work with children and their families. My understanding moved from motor to sensory to really the entire developmental process, looking at it from every angle. So DIR floor time is a philosophy for parents and professionals that provides support or that supports the development of all children. As professionals, we bring this into our work with children who have challenges in relating and communicating, including autism. I want to really highlight, because we're looking at OT, but we're also looking at what others bring in from this interdisciplinary group that helped me become a better OT. As we relate to one another, we are always altering our actions in response to our partner. So as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking about all of you out here over the internet, and I'm really trying to visualize you. But if you were right in front of me, I may be reading your cues and saying, oh, I need to slow down. I need to be a little bit quieter. And I'm going to really alter what I'm doing so that we can stay in the interaction. So I'm thinking about how do we sense how to alter our actions to our partner. And this is the core of the I, or individual profile of DIR, understanding the unique aspects of the child, the caregiver, and ourselves in the flow of the interactions. DIR brings in the lens of the interdisciplinary team with the family at the center. So I'm thinking about what does the mental health person bring in to help me understand the emotional life of the child and the relationship at an emotional level between the parent and the child. And what about my own emotional relationship with both the child and the parents? We have the MD giving us a lot more really deeper understanding of these disorders from the medical model too, not just saying, oh, it's because of autism, but really understanding all of the intricacies that can impact a child and contribute to how they're experiencing the world. Contributions from OTPT to the interdisciplinary group has helped us understand the sensory processing profile, the motor control, and praxis and visual spatial capacities. Speech and language have assisted us in terms of really understanding more deeply the capacities of the child to communicate. And there's a lovely marriage between OT and SLP as we look at the gestural aspects of communication and how the body is so tied in with communication. Our education colleagues are bringing in all they learn from other professionals to really think about how to tailor the educational process to meet each individual's learning profile, as does the music therapist think about how they're going to use music to support the rhythms of the interaction with the child. Art therapists are really important in terms of that marriage between art and that physical expression with the emotional development of the individual. And then we're looking at social support and many others who are working with the child. Each person has their insight and their lens, and we can learn from one another. So in my introductions to DIR and the interdisciplinary approach to treatment, in my first meetings, I felt that the interdisciplinary team of professionals embraced what each other shared in their understanding of the child, the family, while still being embracing to their own and being honorable to their own professions. We learned from one another as Greenspan and Weeder led the group of psychologists, physicians, OTs, PTs, speech and language educators, music therapists, art therapists, as they also included a strong parent involvement. This has changed my work over the past 20 years. Now, I share my understanding of the individual profile of the child, their sensory processing and sensory modulation, postural control, motor planning, and visual spatial capacities in the context of the relationship with the child and the caregiver. I'm informed by my colleagues to think about the emotional life of the child, their communication capacities, their neurobiological and medical profiles, and the family and their relationships with one another. I think about how to support what we call the functional emotional development of the child in the flow of interactions with their parent, siblings, and peers, and how to tailor the interactions to support the child's ability to share attention and to have regulation, which in the developmental process develops through that co-regulation and the sensory affective interaction of the partner. And what we mean by that is the facial expression, the tone of voice, the emotional texture, the pacing, the time, the rhythm and timing, the volume of the voice. All of those things are part of our sensory affective interaction. We're then looking at how to support the engagement across a wide range of emotions that then supports the ability to show intent or ideas and understand and respond to the intent of and ideas of others. So as a child begins to show their intentions, how do we respond to that? And how do we help them anticipate and predict our responses to them? And that really is talking about how praxis, having an idea and doing something, really transfers into real life social interactions that then lead to, as we respond and have this back and forth flow, the ability to stay in a long, continuous flow of interaction and to feel power, both physically and emotionally, to engage in shared problem solving, not only physical problem solving, but problem solving is also, how do I stay in an interaction with somebody? How do I negotiate Not I say something and then I lose somebody or I shift to something else, but how do I work out, how can I stay in this interaction with somebody? And also, how do I develop impulse control, putting on the brakes, being able to cue into the expectations of society? And all of these abilities begin to develop in the first year of life, but can have challenges for many of the children with whom we work with. So as I'm thinking about that sensory processing and modulation, postural control and motor planning, I'm thinking about this functional emotional development. So it's more than just a motor outcome, but it's how do I function in the world? As development continues and we tailor the interactions to the child's individual profile, we're really supporting the child to move to more abstract thinking. So they move from the physical exploration and mastery of themselves in the world, but being able to think and to abstract and develop their ability to engage in representational play, which really reflects their inner world and what they've experienced in relationship with others, as well as the ability then to move into symbolic play, that imaginary play that lets them plan and explore ideas, to mix and match ideas that bring their own stamp, and to begin to think emotionally, and to develop play that has a logical flow with a beginning, middle, and end, as well as to be able to think of the motives of characters and the motives of others and what they're doing. So not only thinking about me, but thinking about you. So this is the beginning of our functional emotional development, and it continues to develop and become richer over the years and the life experiences. So we learn from the interdisciplinary team that understanding the I, the individual profile from each member of that interdisciplinary team, is essential to support everyone, the parents who can be the play partners or additional play partners, as well as providers. And as we understand the individuals, the I of the child from all of the different professionals, we're able to tailor our affective interactions to engage, to strengthen everyone's developmental capacities in their relationships. So from the OT aspect of the DIR lens, we're thinking about the neurobiological factors that inform all who support the child. So it's not just in an OT session, but it's really how do we share that information so that everybody can tailor their interactions to support the child. So from a sensory processing perspective, we're thinking of sensory discrimination, modulation, and regulation capacities. And regulation capacities don't necessarily just have to be sensory avenues to be able to do it, but it's also how do we use ourselves to help a child in terms of regulation. They can feel that excitement and come back down. They can feel that frustration, and we can go with them and help them come back down. So that they might get frustrated and we might go, oh, it's not working. Oh, they might be screaming, and we're using our affect to bring them down. And we're always thinking about the interconnectivity of these sensory systems that contribute to perceptions, because perceptions help us make meaning of all of these sensations coming in. In the area of motor control, we're thinking about muscle tone, writing and equilibrium, gross and fine motor skills, but we're thinking about them not just in mastery of a skill, but how that relates to our ability to interact with the world and to interact with others socially, as well as emotionally and in the flow of relationships. And in the area of praxis, coming up with ideas, organizing and sequencing the plan, the motor planning itself, execution, and then adaptation, being able to change moment to moment. And our understanding of this can really help parents and other professionals know how they can bring the understanding of this into their work. And then what we can contribute as OTs to visual spatial capacities, the ability to visually attend, to share visual attention and shift it as the environment changes, to assess the visual figure ground as I'm engaging with another person, and to integrate visual with other sensory systems. This is what OTs can contribute, and we're going to learn from the other professionals their understanding, and our lenses then become much more holistic and much more sensitive to who the child and the family are. So that DIR model, developed by Stanley Greenspan and Serena Wieder and expanded by the Perfectum faculty, has really revolutionized our concept of development. In the center, right here, is the affective, meaningful, and successful interactions that really consider the relationship, the family community, the biological-based individual differences, and that functional emotional development. But as we're engaging with the child and the parent, we think about what we call the 5 C's. So we always want to make sure that the child and the caregiver are feeling comfort, competence, control, effective communication, and feeling confident, that sense of self. And so we're going to be reading those cues. So it's not just about what we're doing, but it's how we're doing it. So I just want to share with you now at the end the development of my DIR OT practice. I have a practice with 12 OTs and a child and family therapist, and then we have collaborations with other professionals, not only in this area of Seattle, but also nationally and internationally. Although I have always had parents in my sessions, I made the shift to coaching parents as they are with their child all the time. I share my understanding of the child's individual profile, and I listen to them as they know their child best, and together we reflect. We work together in our ways to support their child. As I have made this shift, and think about it, instead of 1 hour of session a week, now the parent is able to bring it into every interaction throughout the day. I've seen far more progress as the parents understand and embrace the DIR model, and that 1 hour a week of treatment is so much more meaningful for the parent and child, as we all do, and the parents and the child, and all I coach can be brought into life for the child and their family, and everyday life. I collaborate with other professionals and have learned so much from my colleagues to deepen my understanding of the child and the family in a far more holistic way. What I learned from mental health, PT, other OTs, SLPs, physicians, as well as the educators, has been invaluable. My learning has been continuous and continues to develop, and I feel in the last 20 years I've learned more than I did in the previous years. But what I've learned in the last 20 years has really enhanced my previous learning. I'm fortunate enough to lecture in person and online all over the world to a range of professionals to bring DIR into their work. In addition, for many years, I taught sensory and motor development and the eye of DIR from the OT lens in a PhD course for an interdisciplinary group of PhD candidates. I have also taught and continue to teach online with Perfectum, with therapists and educators from all over the world. My most recent co-leaders have been Helena Gueros and Roberta Camina, Helena, a PT, and Roberta, a psychologist, who are leaders in Perfectum Brazil and have just begun the Perfectum DIR online course in Portuguese in Brazil. And it's wonderful to see this developing. I also provide coaching to other professionals and parents in person and online, reviewing their cases with them. Also, what's been incredibly invaluable as we have developed this DIR OT practice, which embraces all my history in terms of motor development, neurodevelopmental therapy, sensory processing, it's brought it into real life. And for that, in Seattle, for the past 20 years, we have been conducting DIR floor time summer camps. And many of your colleagues from Brazil, who are OTs, PTs, speech and language pathologists, mental health providers, educators, have come to the camp to volunteer and to learn the model. My passion is to train everyone, and many of the people I train are college students, some are high school students, and many of them are in their pre-OT programs, wanting to go on to become OTs. Many go on to become special educators, but they bring this understanding of DIR to the work. In this camp, we are working on supporting children in their interactions with peers. It's a wonderful experience, and it's wonderful to have had the opportunity to do this. One other thing I wanted to share with you is now that we've been we have moved since March of this year to the stay-at-home order and stay in place, we have shifted to providing DIR OT services and support of social interactions via telehealth. And I have to say that it has been an amazing experience to have been invited into the home. And I am a guest in the parents' home, and I'm working with them on this side of the computer in their real life experiences. And as an OT, this is amazing. I don't come in with a strict agenda of what we're going to do in the session. I join the parent and the child where they are. I know what our goals are, but I'm listening to the parent in terms of what they want to do as they engage with their child. Having this DIR background has really helped me to be present with the child and the parent, and to be able to use that therapeutic use of self as they engage in the back and forth interaction around everyday, real life, functional and play activities. It has been a gift to me, and it has been so wonderful to work with so many families. Each day, it's very different from my sessions where I'm moving around with the child and the parent, or sitting down on the floor and coaching them. I'm now sitting here as I am now behind my computer. But I have seen such progress and the ability to have insight and be there to support parents during this very challenging time. Also, through Perfectum, we've been providing free online support to therapists in terms of helping them work through telehealth. And these have been going on since the beginning of April. And it's been wonderful to have therapists come from all over the world: Australia, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, Ukraine, Russia, Italy, and many other countries. And we've all come together and learned from one another. It's been wonderful, I have to say. So as I finish, I want you to think about relationships, that the foundation for life is built on the ability to attain and sustain co-regulation, not just with an infant and a developing child, but as we have matured and are as adults. It's all about relationships and reading one another. The relationships are the vehicle for creating multiple opportunities for learning and understanding people and the world, thus creating every individual's unique and meaningful perceptions and memories. We all have our own unique experiences that come from those robust interactions, that come from how we take in the sights and the sounds and the action of the world and embrace it within our emotional sense of self. So as OTs, we can make a significant contribution to support relationships as we collaborate and learn from our fellow professionals in the rich interdisciplinary group who are dedicated to working with children and their families. This is about all of us coming together and really learning from one another, sharing our work to be able to really support the rich development of children and their parents in the context of their relationships with one another. My thanks for inviting me to share my journey with you. And once again, it's been a pleasure to have been invited to do this. And I look forward, when we move out of COVID, to once again return to visiting all of you in Brazil. But until that time, we can visit one another via the internet. At the end of this PowerPoint is a little bit more information about how to contact me and to join me in many of the other avenues of the way I work with children and their families. Thank you very much, Isabel, for inviting me to do this. You're doing an amazing job in bringing us all together. And I look forward to hearing that many of you will be joining the trainings for DIR Brazil, Perfectum DIR Brazil. Thank you very much.